Hey guys, Maniac here with another Mind of Maniac. This one was requested. It was probably one of my first Mind of Maniac requests. I know I haven't done one of these in a while, but I just thought I'd make you guys aware of it because I thought it was a interesting concept, but I kind of thought it needed some time for it to sit on me. You know, I needed to think about it. I needed some time to think about it. That's why I mean, when I was coming back to ideas, I thought, you know what? Now is the time to really talk about this, especially after E3 and everything that we saw at E3 that was going on. I thought now is a good time to talk about this, and that is, if you've seen the title of the video, the controller and the future of the controller. And really, it was just based upon a simple comment that I got from one of the first Mind of Maniacs I did, and they basically asked me, where do I think the controller is going? Now, most of you guys, when you are familiar with controllers, you think about something like this, the Xbox 360 controller. And after E3, a lot of people saw the new Wii U's controllers that were not the touchpads, and they saw a very similar controller to this. And Twitch, on the other hand, also brought that up as well. He is fairly certain that the controller is the controller and will stay the controller. And his feelings were, he couldn't be here, but he talked about it with me today when I told him I was going to do this video, that he's under the assumption that pretty much you buy a game, you get the controller, you use the controller to operate the game, and that is it. Anything else that has been brought in, anything to shake that up, has been a complete failure. Either it was too expensive, it didn't work, or both. And the controller is tried, the controller is tested, the controller will stand the test of time, so long as it's made properly. Of course, these are certainly that. Or of course, I mean, like this for example, this is the DualShock 3. Sony has not changed their controller since the midpoint of the PS1 days. It's still pretty much the same controller. It's got the rumble features. It's got they added some motion sensing technology with the PS3, but the basic design of the controller has not changed. In fact, when Sony wanted to change it for the PlayStation 3 version, they had that boomerang idea for it. They basically just decided to go back to this design. They took out the rumble feature. And in exchange for using some type of force-sensitive systems, kind of similar to how the Nintendo did with their Wiimote, but when it just didn't work for them. I mean, in fact, actually, I've noticed recently very, very few games nowadays in this part of the PlayStation 3 generation pay any attention to the fact that there's motion sensing systems in place in these controllers. Most of the games that made use of them, like Lair, for example, or Heavenly Sword, had to either add or patch in functions to turn that off so you could use the thumbsticks, which were much more precise and responsive. So we went into this whole generation thinking that motion sensing was going to be the way to go. For example, with this. And, well, that's pretty much been kind of a moot point, but I'm getting ahead of myself. This is a controller. This is a controller. This is also a controller. And this is also a controller. So, from Twitch, he felt that you were either going to get this, which he doesn't actually like this controller very much. I don't mind it at all, but I know a lot of people that do. Or this, which is pretty much considered to be a pretty standard thing. A pretty basic controller, but a very well-designed one. And for that, and they'll think that's pretty much going to be where the end of the controller is. And then some companies tried to shake it up. Nintendo was the first to kind of shake it up when they introduced this as a controller, where you basically didn't use this for controls by itself, but that you used the gestures as well, so that you were doing more than just attacking. You were doing this, or you were moving around with it, or you were going high and low, and that would be used in conjunction with another thing for directional pads. But for the most part, Nintendo was betting on this for the Wii generation. And to be perfectly honest, that decision to bet on that was actually really good for them. They were the #1 game console of this generation. They've only recently been outsold by the Xbox 360. So the decision to actually bet upon this for their generation did very well for Nintendo. The Wii printed money for several years and did very, very well for them. It also allowed them to have an inexpensive and profitable console at launch, which did extremely well for them. It wasn't a good long-term strategy because right now they are the first to market with their new console, which is coming out probably later this year or something. But they decided to shake things up, and because their systems really came out with a good engineering staff and they had good games designed around it to make good use of it at launch, people were thinking this is going to be the next big thing. And there were some companies that tried to jump on the bandwagon thinking that this was going to evolve. The thing was that I don't think this had really good staying power. I know a lot of people that are completely against the thought of motion control gaming in any function, regardless of how good the game is. Alex Aberrate, the guy who worked on, oh god, I can't remember what he worked for, but guys like him online who just, when they saw the new Zelda game, they were like, I just can't bring myself to play it. Even though the reviews were fantastic, it was a motion control game, and that was just completely unacceptable to him. And I can think of others with that. Sony came out with their own system, the Move Wand, which has, of course, buttons and everything else, and it pretty much functions like the Wiimote does. It's a bit more precise because it has gyroscopes inside of it. They added this with the Wii Motion Plus, which I did not include with this. But you understand. But pretty much it was identical, and they used the same type of system where it was gesture-based as well as controller-based. It worked in some games. I liked it in Sorcery. I liked it in Heavy Rain when Heavy Rain was patched to it. I thought it worked really well for a new type of control type. Kind of expensive. I mean, the Move system cost $100, $125. It still does. It's an expensive peripheral. Twitch is completely against getting it. I was very much against getting it. But you know what? It's cool for a while. It's cool for games that were just based around it. But there's so many games that this just would not work for, like Assassin's Creed, for example, which is I just started playing, or a first-person shooter game. I tried using this on a first-person shooter game. It just didn't work. I mean, I know they said, oh, it's great because you can use it to line up your sights. For some, but the problem wasn't in actually lining up the sights or in getting precise aim. The problem was in turning plus shooting. And that's the problem with this type of controller scheme for a first-person shooter game. You can try to aim all you want, but to turn, you have to actually move your gun away move your crosshairs away from the center of the screen in order to turn. It worked in the Metroid Prime games because with the Metroid Prime games, the aiming reticles did not require a full turn in order for the controls to start moving, maybe about a quarter turn or something like that. It didn't require you to basically have your crosshair off the screen in order for it to respond. It just didn't work. So in that case, we're going back to this. Also, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, this can also be a controller. I know, I'm surprised too. But when you think about it, with what's been going on with when Microsoft introduced the smart glass technology, which will function with iPhones as well as Android phones and Windows phones as well as tablets across the spectrum of the three platforms, these can also become the controller. In fact, I remember buying some PC motherboards a couple months ago, and they were designed, one of the functionalities of them was that they were designed in order to interface with these things so that you could play games with, using this as a controller. It was a very interesting concept. In fact, this is something that Nintendo is really betting on. They are betting that the touchscreen is going to be this. Of course, their controller is going to be bigger than just this. But a lot of people think that perhaps touchscreens could very well be the next major controller system. I mean, it happened with the DS and, of course, the 3DS where you had touch responses. The Sony PlayStation Vita has a touchscreen, although that's in conjunction with buttons, as is the 3DS. And Nintendo is betting that the possibility could exist where you have not just a touchpad but also buttons. Now, honestly, I'm in kind of a wait and see with that one. I honestly don't think the future of control systems will be the touchscreen plus the buttons. And here's the reason why. As Vita users will be aware, you basically, when you've got a controller, imagine for example that this was a PlayStation, it's just elongated a bit and the touchscreen is in the center. You've basically got your, you've got your analogs, you've got your trigger buttons, you've got your face buttons, and you've got your directional pad. So I can have my hands on, with the way hands work, I can have my hands on about 2 or 3 different things at once, each hand. I can either control the pitch and movement of my character as well as the trigger buttons, or I can control strafe in the face buttons, or I can control pitch and the D-pads along with the trigger buttons. Since the way the placement is designed, I can't control I can only touch the touch screen by taking my hand off of several of the buttons as well as one of the analogs. Controlling with this, I can handle many buttons. But the problem is that I can't touch the touchpad as well as control some of the buttons at once. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Now, you could say, well, what if I gestured? What if I did this as well as gestured? That works. What if I get some feedback from the controller? That works. But the thing is that it's either basically you're making use of the touchpad or you're not. Or you're making use of the buttons. You can't do both. In the case of things like the smart glass, this is just basically designed to be used in opposite of a controller. In the case of, let's say you're trying to control what movie you're watching, what kind of like a buttonless remote control. Or trying to get more information on a second screen, so you'll be watching the movie or playing your game video, and then, oh, I'm getting more information about this area on my system. It works in the case of you don't have to pause the game to get that kind of information because, it's like games include encyclopedias or other information and stuff like that. You could be playing the game and then instead of having to go to the menu to look up your manual, for example, or move lists, you can basically, look it up on the second screen while still playing and then glancing down or something like that. I've seen, use it? I've seen keyboards, like there's a Logitech keyboard that actually has a second screen which is designed to keep like heads-up data on it. Unfortunately, that keyboard really, because you're looking down. We only have 2 eyes, and we can only really focus on one direction. And so it works if you're just like, let's say, using a tablet device by itself. It works if you're using a system by itself, but using 2 screens at once and focusing on 2 things at once is, it's difficult for gamers as well as controlling a game. I mean, it's cool to have that information there, and trust me, it's really cool to have the kind of information on the go because I can take this anywhere. Let's say I download the information I want to have, and and I can pause. when I'm not playing the game, I can go through all of it. But I don't have to have a type of integrated technology to make use of that type of thing. I can just download a separate app. BioWare did it with Mass Effect. I can actually view like the Mass Effect 3 data pad on these things instead of having to. There's no need of smart glass for that type of functionality. As with, like, I can just view the Halo waypoint while I'm gone without having to integrate the Halo waypoint with Halo 4. Although they did demo that was a certain possibility. Also, there's the Kinect, which I have not pictured here because the Kinect camera is quite expensive and I really didn't want to move it because I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable with moving it. Is that the future? Now, many would say no. And I'm not saying that I'm a complete no. But the Kinect has a lot of fallacies which are inherent into the hardware. One is the response time with it. Another is the quality of like the detection systems and the hit detection and stuff like that. It's just not there in a lot of cases. And I know that Angry Joe Vargas especially looked at this when he was looking at that new tank game. I can't remember what it was called. Basically that was like a manual on what not to do with a Kinect game. You could, the gestures weren't properly responding. It just wasn't registering the proper hand motions. It just was, And he was basically betting that a Kinect was going to launch with like a next generation Xbox, and then it was going to be like, we have it work now. As it stands by itself, the Kinect is, how do I put this? It's only good under certain respects, in that as long as it's not a game that requires twitch reflexes and stuff like that, it works in that respect. Slow responses and other things. It doesn't have a very good camera lens in there, so it's not very good for person-to-person video. It doesn't have a good response time, so it's not great for twitch reflexes gaming. And because without buttons and stuff like that, which is what Sony bet on having a response system with buttons, as did Nintendo. They basically said, you need some type of tactile feedback, or else the possibility exists that the system might not properly detect it. But there are things that the Kinect is really good for. Like, for example, simple gestures, or the microphone response system. I think where the future is going is that the Kinect actually will be a part of that, but in conjunction with the second controller. I think that the future is that we will be using the controller, or a controller like this for a long period of time, a regular controller, as well as using something like a Kinect. And both of those in conjunction will be our gaming future. It will be able to capture you just like a Kinect does. You'll be able to do voice chats and video chats by voice command. You'll be able to do things like pause, stop, rewind by voice command. Trust me, it's a heck of a lot easier to just say Xbox pause or Xbox fast forward than it is to pick up a controller or pick up an Xbox remote. God help you if you actually have one of those Xbox remotes. They're pretty much obsolete now. But that seems to be the kind of future where it's hiding. I don't think that by itself the Kinect actually will stand, but in conjunction with a control system or a physical controller, I do think that that's going to be where it's headed. And there are a lot of games actually that were released over the past year that made use of both of them in conjunction, and there are plenty more that are coming. The new Splinter Cell game will be able to have that kind of functionality, so you'll be able to tip off guys to try to draw them to you by speaking. Mass Effect 3, you were able to speak out your voice commands as well as give commands for Shepard or Shepard's team. Recently, the Halo Anniversary voice commands and stuff like that, so I could look up scans and pull scan information and stuff like that, worked really well. I could feed separate commands while I was playing, like you could just say original or something like that. I can't remember what the exact command was, and switch over without having to hit one button. I could just keep playing and then just say the words, and then or I could say grenade, and then the grenade would fire, and that sort of thing. And to be perfectly honest, as long as you were calibrated to whatever audio system you were in, the Kinect's voice command system was actually quite good. And it was able to identify the speeches. At least it was for me. I had really no problems with it, except whenever I moved into a room that it wasn't calibrated for, on an audio system that it wasn't calibrated for. But it was relatively good most of the time. In fact, it also had a really good range. My only concerns I had with the Kinect, it couldn't understand me while I was brushing my teeth. And I did report that to Xbox support, who got a good laugh, I'm sure, off of that one. I only meant it in jest, but the truth is, no, the Kinect does not understand you while you're brushing your teeth. At least it didn't understand me. But why are you playing a video game while you're brushing your teeth? That's, yeah. I was watching Crackle videos, I think. That's what I was doing. I was watching like a video on demand. So that's where I think the controller is going. Like with any type of generation, you get an evolution. It started off, you had the joystick, and then it moved to the D-pad and the button. Then you had things like the pause button and the select button, which were added in, and then later on you got the trigger buttons, and then the analog came around, which worked, and then rumble was added, and then rumble came in, and then after that you had wireless, and then there was motion sensitive. And now it looks like the new system is going to be, or the new evolution upon that is voice commands and gesture responses. Now, like with every generation, you take the best of what works. It's almost like a Darwinian type of system. There, I said it. It's like Darwinian. What works, works, and what doesn't work isn't seen again. So I think what's going to happen is that we're going to have a type of control system where there will have gestures in response to the controller, but still you will have a controller. I don't think touch is going to continue on or be majorly successful except in mobile platforms. I do think touch and gesture in a mobile platform will work just fine. Because let's face it, mobile, you're not going to have a lot of space for buttons. You're not going to have a lot of space. You want to be able to keep something in your pocket. If you have buttons, it adds bulk, it adds weight. And on top of that, these phones are quite popular. By simply changing the interfaces, you can change what you can have on the screen, what type of commands you can have on the screen. To say nothing of the fact that this also responds to things like gesture bases as well. I can tilt, I can shake it, I can do all that sort of thing, and that actually are considered gesture responses. I can alter the perception of it, I can use the cameras, I can re-invert it. All of that works. So gestures seem to be useful in conjunction with commands. Gestures alone don't seem to be the bread and butter. But I do think that capture is going to stay around, but probably it will remain in conjunction with some type of button. It seems like this seems to work best. In fact, actually, as we've seen, even though the Wiimote will be compatible with the Wii, because the Wii U will be backwards compatible with Wii games, I don't know about GameCube games. If anybody knows that if GameCube games will be playable on a Wii U, please post a comment, because I really hope it will be. You don't even have to have memory slots. Just let me play GameCube games on it. With a regular Wii, with like a Wii U type controller, I'll be fine with that. I can live with that. So that's where I think we're going. And let me tell you something. I'd be more than happy to hear what you think is going. Twitch, his comments, he doesn't think it's going to stray much farther from this. Like I said, mobile platforms, that's different. I'm talking mostly about console platforms and stuff like that. Again, I don't think touch is going to be a major concern unless, like you kind of did what the PlayStation Vita does, where maybe there's a touchpad under here or something like that, because the PlayStation Vita can do that. Maybe we might add touch or tactile sensors under here, because your hands are going to be under here anyway. Would make sense, but gestures based upon that, as long as they're not used for important feedback. Like, as long as I'm not controlling something like this, and I'm controlling something, because it's so much easier just to control something like this. It just is. To control something like this is almost like it's a novelty. It's not really interesting. So that's my take on it. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please post a comment on what you feel like your thoughts are. I want to hear them, and I think others are probably interested as well. But I really do think that the Kinect is here to stay. But we're still going to be with this, or in the case of like this, you use a steering wheel or stuff like that. I think that I do think the controller is here to stay, but the popularity of gesture-based and just the convenience of having voice response, like pause, stop, back, rewind, that convenience cannot be ignored. This is annoying, or having to play a whole game like this is kind of annoying unless I'm doing a workout, in which case I'll be hurting the day after. But I do think that this, in conjunction with pause or something like that, can be the future. This will continue to live on, no doubt about it, in the mobile space. This isn't going anywhere. Touch for the tablet and the phone mobile, that's going to stay forever. Will there be integration between the two? Probably, but it's probably going to be based upon getting information to the go. Otherwise, you might as well just hit pause and pull up a second menu. But let's say, for example, I want to read about something when I'm not using my system. Download to this and go. I think this will work for the to-go, but for the console, it's going to be this, and I do think that some form of the Kinect will be sticking around. But I don't think that this will be living for much longer, and I honestly don't think that this is going to just continue on until this next generation. I really don't. It's fun, but I can list on one hand how many good games made good use of this or used a superior version of this. I can think of Heavy Rain, I can think of Sports Champion, and I can think of Sorcery. That's it. That's all I can think of. Everything else that worked better with this. So there you have it, guys. Until next time, Maniac out.